She joked, "Play Chopin and I'll marry you." But when the janitor sat at the piano, what happened next left everyone speechless. The marble floors of Harrington Hall echoed with designer heels and whispered deals. Millionaire heiress Isabella Harrington, bold and brilliant, was the talk of New York's elite. She had brains, beauty, and billions, but no one had yet captured her heart. At one of her lavish galas, surrounded by CEOs and celebrities, she made a playful challenge. "If someone can play Chopin's Ballade No. 1 perfectly," she laughed, sipping champagne, "I swear, I'll marry them on the spot." The room erupted with amusement, thinking it was just another rich girl's joke. Behind them, quietly sweeping near the grand piano, stood Marcus, the janitor. He was tall, quiet, and unnoticed, just part of the background like furniture. But his fingers paused slightly on the broom handle when he heard the name Chopin. Marcus had worked there for years, invisible to the glamorous guests. Most thought he was uneducated, hired for simple tasks, and nothing more. But no one knew about his past. Raised by a music teacher mother in Georgia. By 12, he could read complex sheet music and played classical piano for hours. But life hadn't been kind. Tragedy struck, and dreams were shelved for survival. He took the janitor job to support his siblings after losing his parents. Still, every night, when the hall was empty, he sat at the grand piano and played. The keys became his secret escape, the melodies his hidden world. He never imagined he'd play in front of anyone, especially not Isabella Harrington. But something about that challenge sparked an old fire in his soul. As laughter filled the room, Marcus stepped forward slowly, drawing confused stares. "Excuse me," he said politely, "may I try?" The guests paused, then burst into laughter. A janitor playing Chopin? Isabella raised a brow, intrigued more than amused. "You know Chopin?" she asked. Marcus simply nodded and sat down at the grand piano, brushing dust off the keys. The room fell silent, not out of respect, but disbelief and curiosity. Then he began. The first few notes danced gently, then swelled into brilliance. His fingers moved with elegance, each note pure, precise, and passionate. The laughter faded. Heads turned. Mouths fell open. Eyes widened. He was masterful. Every movement, every pause was breathtaking. Isabella stood still, her champagne glass trembling slightly in her hand. She had heard this piece in the finest concert halls, but never like this. There was raw emotion in Marcus's playing, joy, sorrow, power, and grace. Even those who didn't understand classical music were moved to silence. One guest whispered, "He's not just playing, he's telling a story." Tears welled in a few eyes as Marcus neared the final crescendo. And when the last note rang through the hall, a long silence followed. Then came thunderous applause, genuine, stunned, and full of awe. People stood, clapping, some even shouting bravo. But Marcus stood up quietly, avoiding the spotlight, ready to return to his broom. Isabella walked slowly toward him, her expression unreadable. He expected sarcasm, maybe polite thanks, then dismissal. But instead, she extended her hand, gently but firmly. "That was magnificent," she whispered, still recovering from shock. "You said you'd marry the man who played it." Someone joked nervously. The room chuckled, waiting for her witty reply. But Isabella turned to Marcus and said, "What's your name?" "Marcus," he replied softly, unsure if this was a dream. She smiled. "Well, Marcus, looks like you just shocked a millionaire." He smiled faintly, the first real smile in a long time. Word of the event spread like wildfire through social media and news channels. Janitor Stun's elite gala with Chopin performance headlined every outlet the next day. Offers came pouring in, music schools, orchestras, interviews, and even sponsorships. But Marcus didn't seek fame. He only wanted to play and inspire others. Isabella, however, couldn't stop thinking about him. Not just his talent, but his soul. She invited him to dinner, not as a performer, but as a friend. They talked for hours about music, loss, ambition, and dreams. She discovered he had more depth than anyone she'd ever met. He found in her a listener who truly saw him. Not his job, but his heart. A connection sparked, unexpected but undeniable. Paragraph 7. Weeks turned into months. Their meetings became regular, their bond stronger. Marcus started teaching piano at a community center Isabella helped fund. She'd often sit in the back, watching him teach kids with patience and love. To the world, they were an odd pair, heiress and janitor. But to each other, they were simply two souls who understood life's melodies. He showed her the beauty of simplicity. She showed him the power of believing again. One evening, under the same chandelier where it all began, Isabella stood up. In front of family, friends, and press, she took the microphone. "I once said I'd marry anyone who could play Chopin," she smiled. "Well, I meant it." She turned to Marcus, eyes shimmering with emotion. "You didn't just play Chopin, you awakened something in me." Gasps and applause erupted as she knelt slightly and offered him a ring. Marcus, stunned, pulled her gently up and whispered, "I should be the one asking." They laughed, embraced, and the hall that once echoed with shallow chatter now rang with genuine joy and celebration. It wasn't about status anymore. It was about music, heart, and destiny. The janitor who swept floors had now swept the heart of a millionaire, and the heiress who had everything finally found what she was missing, a soul in harmony with hers. Their wedding wasn't a royal affair, but a heartfelt musical evening. Every guest, regardless of wealth or title, was invited to bring a story or song. Marcus played a Chopin piece as his vows, bringing tears to many. Isabella danced barefoot in the garden, free and full of joy. They started a foundation for underprivileged youth to access music education. The janitor, who was once overlooked, became a symbol of hidden brilliance. Children looked up to him, not because he was famous, but because he was real. Their love story wasn't a fairy tale. It was a symphony of truth. It reminded people that class, color, or titles didn't define greatness. Heart did. Years later, an old piano sat in their home, well-used, well-loved. Framed above it was a plaque that read, "If you play Chopin, I'll marry you." It made them laugh every time they passed by. Visitors often asked if the story was true, and they'd simply smile. Music echoed through their home, along with laughter and children's footsteps. Marcus never forgot where he came from, and Isabella never stopped honoring it. Together, they lived not in a mansion, but in a world built on mutual respect. And whenever life felt off-key, they'd sit by the piano and let Chopin guide them. After all, that was where their song began.